They just keep finding a way to win, 10 on the spin, so credit to them. When you've got a player like Morgan Rogers in your team, you've always got a chance of a bit of magic. And they just seem in that mood right now where they know they're always going to find a way to win, even if they're not at their best. And that's not a bad skill set to have.
And when you're performing as they are and putting results on the board as they are, they deserve to be in the conversation.
And the game changed really at half-time with the lack of Bruno being on the pitch. They're basically losing their best player. His stats stand up to almost anyone in the Premier League who have been winning titles. So it's a massive, massive blow.
And Crook's got a bit of breaking news on Mo Salah.
I think this Isak injury really puts paid to any hope that Mo Salah had of leaving Liverpool in this window, if indeed that was his ultimate ambition. I still think he'll probably leave at the end of the season, but my sources close to Salah are suggesting that they don't think there's much chance now that he'll be sold in January.
A big hello to you and Merry Christmas as well. Crookie's got his Christmas jumper on for the Premier League All Access Christmas pods. That's good. Scott Minto is here looking $1 million as always. And what a fantastic weekend of Premier League football, Crookmeister.
Yeah, the feast and the famine for me. I was at Brighton Sunderland on Saturday, which is a game that I'd forgotten about as soon as I left the car park. But I really enjoyed Villa United on Sunday. Obviously, the result didn't go my way in terms of a fan's perspective, but I was quite buoyed by what I saw from Manchester United. 2 great goals from Morgan Rogers for Villa, and just a really good game of blood and thunder Premier League football. Just what you need at this time of year.
We're going to get to it in detail in just a few moments and have a look back on what we thought the problems were for Manchester United and then our assessment of Aston Villa as well, who obviously have got to be in the conversation for the title race now, only 3 points back from Arsenal at the top of the table. Alexander Isak had an eventful 15 minutes, didn't he, Scott? And he is not going to be around for a long time.
No, and I mean, it's worst case scenario for him and it's worst case scenario for Liverpool, isn't it? I mean, after all the rigmarole of what happened in pre-season, the refusing to play, therefore needing extra time to try and get up to fitness. He didn't seem fit for a very long time. And, you know, getting to the point where he's saying, well, we can't blame that anymore now. He comes on, he scores a goal. Could this been the moment that suddenly kickstarts his Liverpool career? But the moment he scores the goal, he gets the injury. And I don't know how long he's going to be out for, but it does sound a pretty serious one. And if he's out for the season, then it's just a shocking season for him and the club.
And Crook's got a bit of breaking news on Mo Salah today that he's been putting out in the ether, and that is he's going nowhere.
Yeah, we wondered how this would play out, obviously, after the sort of uneasy truce, as I described it, between player and manager after those explosive comments from Salah. He's off at AFCON. I think this Isak injury really puts paid to any hope that Mo Salah had of leaving Liverpool in this window, if indeed that was his ultimate ambition. I think with Isak facing at least a couple of months out, they're going to need Mo Salah. He's going to get the game time that, of course, he was bemoaning not being given. I still think he'll probably leave at the end of the season, but my sources close to Salah are suggesting that they don't think there's much chance now that he'll be sold in January.
Okay, West Ham needs some investment in January because they're getting cut adrift, Scotty baby. What you thinking about the Hammers? It's not very happy down there at the moment.
No, and looking at the table as well, you know, 5 points off Forest, and Forest, as we speak, still to play. I do worry for them. I do. I mentioned this to Adrian at the weekend, and you know, the players that we had in the squad back in the day when I was in the squad with Paolo Di Canio and Defoe and Joey Cole and Mickey Carrick, Trev Sinclair, David James. I mean, if ever there was a squad that was too good to go down, it was that, and went down. And this squad is nowhere near that. And I think Nuno's the right man. And if someone can turn it around, it would be him. But I think January would be absolutely massive for sure.
Yeah, I think it will be. But I think you talked about the table and the points difference. What really concerns me more than anything else is the fact that their minus 16 goal difference is so much bigger than anybody else above them in that table. And that is a real worry. Let's get into the Premier League now, kicking off at Villa Park, where Unai Emery's team made it 10 wins in a row. So we're recording this podcast on Monday, and I've come into the talkSPORT office here today, and I just bumped into Andy Jacobs, and he said, "Oh dear, Chelsea have got to beat Villa at the weekend. Now, we're going to do a preview to the Boxing Day. I suppose they are Boxing Day fixtures, but they're taking place on the 27th, a little bit later on. So join us tomorrow for that one. But he said to me, Aston Villa aren't really that good. The statistics tell you that they're not that good. And actually, for large parts of yesterday's game, Alex Crook, Manchester United were the better side.
They were. And actually, Villa scored against a run of play. Brilliant finish as it was from Morgan Rogers. I think for both goals, you could maybe ask if Lenny Yoro should have done more to stop him actually getting in a position to get the ball on his right foot and get the shot away. But yeah, that's why I was encouraged by United, because Villa have beaten Manchester City. They've beaten Arsenal, arguably played better in both of those games than they did on Sunday, but they just keep finding a way to win, 10 on the spin, so credit to them. But yeah, they weren't that good, but they're third in the table, 3 points off top. They're still the rank outsiders with the bookmakers. If you look at the odds of Arsenal and Man City, and then you look at Villa, they're not seeing it as a 3-horse race, and maybe it's because they're using that data that you've talked about. But when you've got a player like Morgan Rogers in your team, you've always got a chance of a bit of magic. And they just seem in that mood right now where they know they're always going to find a way to win, even if they're not at their best. And that's not a bad skill set to have.
It's a great skill set to have. I mean, if you look at the data, they are scoring worldies and outperforming their XG like you wouldn't believe. How can they continue that trend, though, Scott? Because they have been doing it, actually, since the first few weeks of the season, where they weren't scoring any goals and didn't look particularly potent. All of a sudden, that sort of trend of scoring goals from the edge of the penalty area or just inside or just outside has started to take hold. But can they do that forever? Can that keep going? Or at some point, are they going to have to find another way?
Yeah, look, I said last week, and I haven't changed my mind at all, that it's nothing short of sensational what Emery and Aston Villa are doing right now. And it doesn't matter where you score the goals from. And if you can score them from 25 yards, then brilliant. And you can practice daily. And I know Frank Lampard used to do that on a regular basis when I was with him at West Ham. And then he did it at Chelsea, and he scored loads of goals like that. But you can't rely on those 25-yarders if you're seriously talking about a team going to win the title. I said last week, I genuinely think they can finish top 4, and if they do, then that's a wonderful season, because I think they'll go deep into Europa League. We know that Emery, how good he is in that particular competition. It's not a strong competition, so they will go deep, and the combination of Premier League and Europa League, I think, will take its toll on this present squad. And again, we talk about January of other clubs, and certainly for West Ham, but it could be important for Aston Villa. But I'm sorry, with 6 games to go, and it should be all positive, but I don't see Aston Villa keeping up 6 games to go, being within touching distance of either Manchester City or Arsenal.
There will be Aston Villa fans that are listening to this podcast and saying, hold on a second, right? We are 3 points off the top. We might not be playing our ultimate best, but we have already beaten some of the biggest teams in this league. We've beaten Arsenal. We've beaten Manchester United. Yeah, we went up to Anfield and we didn't perform particularly well, but we gave a good game to Manchester City as well. And when you're performing as they are and putting results on the board as they are, they deserve to be in the conversation, don't they, Crook? Do they not deserve to be given a little bit more respect, or are we just sort of so focused on these long-range goals and this data that keeps telling us that they're not going to keep it up forever, that we're almost sort of blinded by that?
Listen, I can understand why their fans are maybe getting a bit rankled by a perceived lack of respect, not just from us as pundits, but as I say, from the bookmakers. I think you still back Villa at 25-1 to win the league, and Arsenal are odds-on favourites. But I'm not sure Unai Emery or his players will be complaining. I think they'll be quite happy to go under the radar. We spoke to Unai after the game yesterday. Very level. He said, look, it's only 17 games into the season. Let's get to the last 4 games of the season. If we're still in this position, then maybe then we can be seen as contenders. But even next week against Chelsea, he said we're second favourites for that game. You know, Chelsea were expected to be challenging for the top 4. We were expected to be challenging for a European place at best. So I think it's a very good tactic to take the pressure off his players and keep piling the pressure on the 2 teams above them in the table. He also wouldn't really be drawn when I asked him about January, because obviously this time last year, when they were chasing Champions League football, he was backed in the transfer market. Gabby Agbonlahor, well connected at his old club, told us on Friday when we were on air with him that he didn't expect them to spend money. He didn't think the funds were there. And I got the impression from Unai Emery's lack of response, lack of bite when I said, are you going to do business in January? That probably is the case.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Because last year they did invest quite heavily, and I wonder whether or not they're hamstrung by PSR this time around, and that will hamper them going forward because the squad isn't that deep, and we saw that with the bench yesterday. And if you looked at, actually, Manchester United's bench looked even more shallow yesterday ahead of the game, and they lost Bruno Fernandes as well. How bad and how damaging will it be if they don't have him, Scott?
I think it would be, I mean, they're basically losing their best player. Simple as that. But by the way, on the game itself, Aston Villa have a play of moments, and that's Morgan Rogers. And Bruno is that type of player for Manchester United. And the game changed really at half-time with the lack of Bruno being on the pitch. And I think we saw with United, they still did, well and gave it their all, but they're just not the same. This would be a massive blow. This is a guy who doesn't get injured. And actually, not only has he been United's best player of the last decade or since Fergie, his stats stand up to almost anyone in the Premier League who have been winning titles. So it's a massive, massive blow. Going to be fascinating to see who he sees in the next few weeks, who he sees is going to be playing instead of him.
Yeah. Who fills the void, do you think? Crookie, Mount, Xerxes, Mainu, or Lisandro Martinez, who came on at half-time and replaced him?
Well, I thought he did really well, Lisandro Martinez, first and foremost. Obviously, he did play midfield quite a bit for Ajax, hasn't really done it for Manchester United, but he himself is only just coming back from a very serious injury, and I'm sure the medical team and the sports scientists will be telling Ruben Amorim not to overplay him, not to be over-reliant. So it's an interesting one. I think the fact he brought on Martinez, a more defensive midfielder, than Joshua Xerxes, who could have come on as a direct replacement, tells you all you need to know about just where Xerxes is in the food chain at this moment in time. But they're stretched to the limit, aren't they? And it's ironic that United fans have been crying out all season for Kobbie Mainoo to get a go in the first team. He would have got his opportunity during this period because of the absentees, and he himself has picked up a knock in training that's going to rule him out for a week or so. So those young players that came on, your Jack Fletchers and your Shea Lacey's, they might have more of a role to play in this festive period than maybe they would have expected.
Thought Cunha played really well in the game and actually could have scored another goal or two. I thought Benjamin Šeško looked a little bit rusty. There were a couple of balls that were played into the box which you expected him to attack and get on the end of, and he didn't quite. He did this thing where he took hold of the ball in the penalty area and decided to go wide of the goalkeeper and almost ended up at St Andrews rather than Villa Park. He went so far away from the goal. What did you think of his performance, Scott?
I thought what I've been thinking all along, he doesn't seem the one right now, but he's young enough to improve. I've mentioned several times about the sort of not taking the penalty at Grimsby and not until the very end anyway, that he, Shearer, Fowler, Owen would have done. I look at him and look, that touch, yeah, it was heavy. I mean, to be fair to him, he was running at pace and he was almost just trying to get there first and waiting for the keeper to come and clip him and win the penalty, and that didn't happen. But in terms of his, is he the man that's going to take United to be winning Premier League titles? No. But he is young enough to improve on a regular basis to help get United. And this is a fantastic season for United in many respects, in the sense that they have no Europe. So they really should be doing really well in the Premier League. So they should be resting. But no, at this moment in time, he's another one of those number nines that is not quite top level. And
the Mainu injury definitely is an injury. There was a lot of conspiracy theorists suggesting that maybe it was not quite an injury. It was actually, in fact, it was Perry Groves who said maybe he's just thrown one in because he didn't think he was going to play in the game. But we understand that it is a proper injury, don't we? And we can sort of kill those conspiracy theories.
Yeah, especially given the number of players that were already unavailable. 7, I think, in total. 8 now with Bruno Fernandes. So he would have got minutes. Whether he would have started the game is probably open to debate. We'll never know the answer to that question. But as I say, the timing is terrible, both from United and from the players' perspective. And Ruben Amorim did say to me afterwards that all these injuries do seem to come at once. Bruno Fernandes is never injured. And then at a time when they're short of bodies already, he picks up something that's going to rule him out for a few weeks.
Have you got a free Kobbie Mainoo t-shirt for Christmas, Crook, by the way?
I haven't actually, funnily enough. It's not on my list.
It's not on your list, no? No, you're not up for that, no?
I prefer him to do his talking on the pitch.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just on that, and he's been hammered, Ruben Amorim, for many things he comes out and says. He's absolutely spot on here. Instead of wearing t-shirts or saying I want to go, how about you getting your head down, working hard, and saying you're not wrong right now, but I'm going to make you pick me at some point in the future. Ruben Amorim is not wrong right now, but get that attitude where I think in society, let alone in football, they don't seem to have. If it doesn't go right, you want to walk away.
Yeah, yeah. Right, should we move on to the title race? Villa right in the mix. So are Arsenal and Manchester City. Arsenal far from their best to beat Everton. When I was at the Hill Dickinson on Saturday night, they relied on a Victor Gyökeres penalty, and a Victor Gyökeres penalty that came about because of a Jake O'Brien handball, which was completely inexplicable. Scott, as a defender in that circumstance, what on earth is he doing? I don't get it. I couldn't work it out. And I spoke to David Moyes afterwards, and I said to him, can you explain it? And he was like, no.
Mate, I haven't got a clue. I mean, I made a career of standing on that far post anyway, so I wasn't sort of right in the 6-yard box picking up the big centre forwards or centre halves. But I don't think I ever did anything like that, and I just don't get it. I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, there was a possible penalty shout just beforehand that led to the corner, which I actually thought was the right decision. He gave just enough of a nudge to not for it to be a penalty. I think you got to be stronger there, Gyökeres. But I have no idea, mate. I'm sorry, I can't defend him in any way whatsoever.
Are we okay with Gyökeres given the penalty when Saka has scored 8 out of 8? Was that just sort of like one of those good captaincy moments where Ødegaard realises that his star striker needs a goal and they trusted him to take it?
Yeah, I think the reaction would have been interesting if he'd missed it, by the way, because obviously the game was 0-0. It was, you were comparing it to when I said Kai Havertz was given a sympathy penalty. Was it down at Bournemouth last season? They were 3 or 4 up at that stage, so they're very different scenarios. But he's buried it, and the decision has paid off. And yeah, we'll put it down as good teammateship now from both Ødegaard and obviously Saka to step aside, because they can be precious, these penalty takers, can't they?
It's interesting, though, because one of the things that we learnt last couple of weeks is that he doesn't decide who takes the penalties anyway. He leaves that to the captain to make the decision on the pitch. Saka basically takes the penalties, then Ødegaard, and now obviously Gyökeres is in the mix as well. But it's interesting, isn't it, Scott, that they have that discussion amongst themselves and they've got the latitude to make the decision.
Didn't Pep have that? And then there was an argument or something, and then he said, "Right, I'm gonna." Certainly, a manager in my mind has said, "Right, I'm taking control of this." I played in the game where Paolo Di Canio and Frank Lampard were almost fighting each other to take the penalty. I think it was the Bradford game, and that itself was quite funny to watch.
Do you remember that Chelsea game? It was the Chelsea game, wasn't it, the other year, where Noni Madueke, Nicholas Jackson and somebody else started scrapping over who was going to take the penalty.
That's right. Honestly, that was a massive moment, because if they hadn't have scored that and it ended up 0-0 after, losing against Villa, just about beating Wolves, 0-0 Everton away, City in the form that they're in right now, that was a massive, massive moment. I thought that at the time. So well done for Gyökeres to take it. It was a powerful penalty. But if it hadn't have gone the right way and it would draw 0-0, tell you what now, could you imagine everybody talking about that moment?
Arsenal were far from at their best, though, and I think we sort of all admit that they weren't particularly potent in the game against Wolverhampton Wanderers either, Scott. And I just wonder about that sort of level of chance creation, that they've started to dry up a little bit in front of goal. 2 own goals against Wolves. Didn't look particularly potent against Aston Villa. They obviously needed the penalty against Everton, although they did create a couple of good chances where they hit the post. The Trossard one was absolutely fantastic, really well constructed move, actually. But I just wonder whether or not the pressure is starting to tell a little bit on 1 or 2 of those attackers, knowing that they are now responsible for trying to maintain this lead at the top of the table.
Well, I think the word maintain is key here. It's practically impossible to maintain that top level, creating lots of chances, home and away throughout a whole season, and be pushing Manchester City away every single time. They're going through a patch at the moment, and it's still a very small patch, but okay, they're not playing as well, but okay, and they lost to Villa, but so did the Manchester City at Villa Park. They found a way to win against Wolves. They found a way to win against Everton. They can't keep on finding ways to win. But I go again, a Premier League season is up and down in terms of form. And when you're not playing well, you have to find a way to win. Everton away is a very difficult place, as they prove that to be. If they had a proper striker themselves, then maybe Arsenal wouldn't have come away with all 3 points. But they don't, and they did. So, do you know what? You move on to the next one.
Best moment of the weekend, by the way, is whilst sitting in the Hill Dickinson Stadium right at the very back with all of the supporters around us, as you do there, right? You're really in the mix with the supporters, is when Dominic Calvert-Lewin scores his second goal in my ear, and I throw to Chris Hull. He does the report, and I come back and say, that's now 6 goals in 5 games for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And the bloke who's sitting in front of me just turns around and says, he hasn't scored again, has he, Sam? And I say, he has. And he says, an expletive. It was absolutely hilarious. And me and Charlie Adam just started cracking up because obviously they're looking for a striker. They would love to have the goals that Dominic Calvert-Lewin is scoring now. And obviously he was allowed to go on a free transfer because he couldn't agree a contract at the Hill Dickinson. Manchester City did score a few goals though, didn't they? All 3 of them from players in top form at this moment in time. Ryan Cherki, is he the most entertaining player in the league, Crook?
I think he's up there. And I'm not surprised that I watched him play for Lyon against Manchester United in that amazing Europa League game last season. And he was absolutely terrific in that game. A real box of tricks before he ran out of gas. And that does still concern me, fitness-wise, that maybe he's not quite at the peak of physical condition. But it's a scary prospect if he does get to that, because he scores goals, he makes goals, he takes players on. He's a maverick, isn't he? And there aren't too many mavericks in the Premier League these days. So, yeah, I think he's an absolute joy to watch. And that's difficult to say, being that he plays on the wrong side of Manchester.
Is it slightly worrying for Arsenal that Pep Guardiola is starting to play down his side's abilities, even though they seem to be cruising through games in first gear?
No, I mean, I think I'd expect Pep to be doing that, whatever, but it's certainly very worrying the form they're in right now. I think they've always been very good going forwards. It's just a question of, how are they in the transition? And it seems to me they're just not getting caught out as much. And don't forget, Rodri's still not playing at the moment. So Nico Gonzalez, amongst others, they're defending better as a team while allowing their attacking players to go forward and do what they need to do. And as long as Erling Haaland stays fit, my goodness me, his numbers are just absolutely sensational.
19 Premier League goals already. He probably could get 40. He could quite easily get 40 in the second half of the season. Let's take a look at another.
For club and country as well. I mean, that's just ridiculous, isn't it? It's just mental numbers.
Absolutely ludicrous figures. But, he is a top level, probably an elite finisher that we probably haven't seen the like of for a very, very long time and won't see again for a very long time. But these numbers are off the scale. Alexander Isak's numbers are not off the scale, but he is going to be off the pitch for quite some time. Let's take a look at Liverpool-Tottenham. Tottenham 1, Liverpool 2. Isak off the bench, scores a goal, immediately gets injured and goes off. The early signs are that the injury is not good, and we've spoken about that at the top of the podcast and the implications that has on Mo Salah. One man who does look in form and is posting numbers, Crook, is Hugo Ekitike, still around and bang in form. He looks a seriously classy player, doesn't he?
He does, and I think the biggest compliment you can pay him is how far he's come from that brainless red card against Southampton, when clearly he was feeling the pressure of Isak coming in and Salah being there. He didn't feel like he was the main man. I think he does now, and I think they've needed him because obviously a lot of the signings they've made in the summer have not performed. I thought Florian Wirtz actually had one of his better games against Spurs, and obviously he's got that assist now, which is a monkey off his back. But Ekitike, over all the summer signings, has been the one who's produced consistently. And yes, you can maybe, if you're a Tottenham fan, complain that there was a push in the back, but it was a brilliant header, a brilliant leap, and I was pleased the goal stood.
Is that consistency in action in the Premier League?
That's consistency, mate. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure?
My middle name.
Yeah, yesterday on the Premier League show that we did, the Game Day Live show, Crookie wandered down a bit of a cul-de-sac, didn't you, by having a go at the referees for their inconsistency because he suggested that the Romero push was very similar to the one that was inflicted on Calvin Bassey at Craven Cottage earlier in the season when they played Manchester United. And he said, you can't give that one and then, oh, they did give the other one as well. No, there is consistency. I'm just talking nonsense. It was one of those moments where he started down an area and he just couldn't pull back from it. And he just thought, in the end, I'm just going to go with it and just say I'm talking nonsense. It was very, very funny. Unlike what Romero ended up doing afterwards, and there have been a few brainless red cards this weekend. What was the worst?
Christian Romero for me. Complete head loss from a captain, supposedly a senior player, at a time when Thomas Frank really needs his players to stand up and be counted. And I tweeted on Saturday night, I got a lot of stick from Tottenham fans, don't care, I'll stand by it. That Christian Romero red card for me epitomises all that's wrong with Tottenham at this moment in time. There's someone there who has cost them goals. Stuart Pearce, I remember being very scathing of Romero during their game against Manchester United earlier in the season. He's not that good a defender. I appreciate he's won the World Cup, and that's something that I can only dream of, and a lot of players can only dream of. But he makes too many mistakes. He gets too many bookings. He gets himself sent off. He's ill-disciplined. And I think it tells you there's a disconnect between Thomas Frank and his players at this moment in time. I think he's struggling with a dressing room that is ill-disciplined and over-entitled.
Yeah, look, I mean, before I talk about Romero, Crookie, I know you scored at Fratton Park in a charity game. So, you have to start somewhere. Never stop your dream of ending up winning the World Cup and scoring that winning goal for England. It may well happen.
I'm going to bet that it doesn't happen. I mean, I don't know. But, it's the odds almost as big as Aston Villa winning the title, but you never know.
Yeah, I think they'd be a lot larger than that. But until then, Romero can always show you his World Cup. But look, no, but you're absolutely right. I mean, what are you doing? Seriously, what are you doing? Somehow you found a way to get it back to 2-1. You've just won a free kick yourself in a dangerous area where you could go on and get the equalisers with a header. And you go and do something like that. I'd slightly disagree with Crookie that I don't think that shows there's this disconnect between Thomas Frank and Romero, because he's done that pretty much all his Tottenham career and even beyond that. But I do think the Van der Ven interview was strange, going on the overlap, and you just don't want your player to be doing that, and that possible holes you can pick up in that way. That would be
that, because that is quite a big thing to do. Like, you try and get a player to come onto a Premier League player, an active Premier League player, onto your radio show, your podcast, or whatever. It has to go through 17 different hoops in order to be able to get it signed off, right? So who signed that off? Who has allowed Mickey Van der Ven to go on that show and almost put doubts in people's minds about the relationships between players and staff?
Well, you can only imagine this has been fixed up by his agency as opposed to the club themselves, because you're right, it'd be very strange for Spurs to allow this to happen and then not to have some kind of editorial approval, because as much as you can laud Van der Ven and for some of the praise he's given Postecoglou, it doesn't half undermine the current manager.
Yeah, very strange situation, because Crook will tell you, when we do these interviews with some of the players that we are given on a week-to-week basis, everything is vetted so that there are certain things you can and certain things you cannot go into. And any sort of wandering down lines of speculation is immediately shut down by the press officers as a result. So it was a very strange thing to do. But what do you think that says about Tottenham Hotspur and the relationship between players and manager? Because just overall, really, I'm trying to get a sense of where they're going with Thomas Frank. Is it going to work, or are they going to be in a situation where actually in the end they're just going to cut their losses and realise that this just was not the right appointment? I can't really work out what the best course of action is here. I mean, there's part of you that wants Tottenham to stick with him because we know he's a good coach. He's a great communicator. He's got good history. You want those people who have developed through the system to end up going on and taking these big jobs. But it doesn't feel like it's fitting, does it?
Well, I don't want to turn this into a Manchester United discussion, but it is relevant because you go back to the Europa League final. It was contested by teams who would ultimately go on and finish 16th and 17th in the Premier League. They both did a lot of business in the summer, as Simon Jordan pointed out to me last week when I questioned the ambition of Tottenham. They did spend £200 million. They did get a new manager in. United regularly this season have gone into game weeks with the opportunity to get into the top 4 or 5 in the table. They're only 3 points behind 5th as we sit here now. Tottenham, 7 points behind 5th place. So at the moment, it's the Europa League runners-up who seem to be kicking on and seem more capable of challenging for Europe. Tottenham look like they're going to end the season languishing in the lower half of the table again. Maybe not as low as last season, but that's where if you're a Thomas Frank detractor, you can say, well, actually, what progress are we seeing here?
He hasn't been given time. I mean, look, let's be honest. He hasn't even had a window where there's no Daniel Levy, and we don't know if those people being bought are Daniel Levy signings or Thomas Frank signings.
Listen, don't fall into that trap, Scott. The Lewis family are ENIC. They're still run by the same people. Okay, Daniel Levy made a lot of decisions and he protected their money, but he wasn't doing it without orders from above. So this is not going to be a whole new Tottenham. It's nonsense.
I'm not saying it's going to be a whole new Tottenham, but what I am saying is you're not telling me that ENIC and the Lewis family sat down, looked at the data, looked at the analysis and said, right, yeah, we'll go with him. They've left that to Daniel Levy to trust him. And he, as a businessman, there ain't many people better to make the finances look good while still be bringing players in. Kudos. I watched him in that Liverpool game. He's bereft of confidence. He's gone at the moment. And they've got to try and find a way to get the best out of him. Xavi Simons, forget the sending off. He hasn't hit the ground running in any way whatsoever. And people might turn around and say, well, that's down to the manager to get the best out of them. I just think Thomas Frank, where you look at, you mentioned it there, where they've started from. Yes, they won the Europa League. It was a poor Europa League, but it doesn't matter. They won the Europa League. But actually, you judge a team on where they are in the league, and they finished the worst of the rest. They were never going to go down, but they were the worst of the rest. So they're starting from that level, and they haven't even had a window yet without Daniel Levy's, controls and tentacles all over it. So it's not great. It's not been a great start for Thomas Frank. I do worry slightly that Mickey van der Ven went on there and kind of, alluded the fact of how much he loved Ange. I just think there was no need for it. But he needs time and he needs backing. He doesn't need the people to go the other way. And he needs the people above to say, we're with you, what do you want? And we're about to step up and help you.
But you can only get that backing, that pat on the back, that reassurance, if he's delivering on the football pitch. And they're not delivering on the football pitch at the moment. And at home, in particular, you are asking for trouble if you only win 4 games in 23. I don't care who you are. If you keep losing matches at home, you're going to pile pressure onto your shoulders. So somehow, some way, he's got to find a way of start to win games at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Because unless he does that, the pressure isn't going to go anywhere. It's going to be on him.
Of course, he has to win games. Managers know that. Ultimately, it's all about winning games. My argument is this is a guy who you identified, who you thought was good, was ready to take the next step up. And actually, how much control has he had? Always, Sam.
Who identified him, Scott? Who identified him? Because, okay, we might think he's great at what he does because we've seen him coach at Brentford and we've spoken to him on a number of occasions and we believe that this guy's got something that he can deliver in the Premier League. But, the people that have appointed Thomas Frank are the same people that appointed Ange Postecoglou, are the same people that appointed Jose Mourinho and Conte and Stellini when Conte walked out, the same people that gave the job to Ryan Mason ahead of a cup final when they qualified and had the chance to win a League Cup for the first time in God knows how long. It's the same people that have done the recruitment that isn't top draw. So all of the things you're saying there are correct, but ultimately, this is a club that have got a history of mediocre recruitment in every department.
But this is my point. All that was done with Daniel Levy at the club and him making the decisions.
But if Langer and Paratici are still there, which they are at this moment, then they're going to be the ones that are recruiting the players, aren't they?
No, I agree with that. But there's no way it would have happened without Daniel Levy. Now, they might have understood the parameters that they're working under. Otherwise, they're just not very good. But this is, yes, money's been spent, but actually, in terms of wages, you're not getting those ready-made players that will take it to the next level. Always has been, always will be about the players. And the players are not good enough at the moment. They've got some players that are out injured. They've also got some players who are just not cutting it at the moment, new signings. Thomas Frank has to find a way. Ultimately, it's all about winning games, and especially at home. I want to see him given the very least this season, a couple of windows, and let's judge him on the beginning of next.
Newcastle 2, Chelsea 2. A brilliant game to kick off the weekend. Newcastle letting a 2-goal lead slip again. They've let too many leads slip over the course of the season so far. It was a proper game of two halves. They started so brilliantly, didn't they? They'll be gutted that they didn't come away with all 3 points.
Yeah, and actually, even in the second half, they had opportunities to still come away with all 3 points. I agree with Eddie Howe. I think they should have had a penalty at 2-1 up. I thought the force for the challenge on Anthony Gordon was beyond the reasonable limit, and therefore it should have been a spot kick. Wasn't given. Chelsea equalise, and then right at the end, Anthony Elanga goes through down the left-hand side. I'm screaming at the TV in the press lounge at Brighton. They must have thought I was mad to square the ball because it would have been a tap-in for his teammate in the middle. He made the wrong choice, and that sort of sums up Elanga's Newcastle career at the moment. But it is a habit that Eddie Howe will be concerned about, the number of leads that they're chucking away. And for Chelsea, again, it's almost a microcosm of their form in recent weeks. They're not Jekyll and Hyde from one game to another. They're now Jekyll and Hyde from one half to another, which is a concern.
Well, they clicked into gear in the second half, but in the first 45 minutes, I was pulling my hair out. In fact, I sent Crookmeister a text message was saying, someone needs to tell them the game starts at 12:30, not 1:30. It's absolutely ridiculous the way they started that game. But it happens to them too often, Scott. So it started badly at Manchester United. It started badly at Leeds United away from home. It started badly at Newcastle away from home. Why are they not prepared and ready to deal with what we all know is going to come at them in those hostile environments?
Yeah, and this is why I've been saying all along they're not ready to be title challengers. They haven't got that mentality where they can go to Newcastle, St James's Park, Ellen Road. They know it's going to be tough. They can dig in. I'm sorry, I can't play Menza Maresca here. He would have told them to be up for it in the dressing room, 100%. He picked a team that was good enough to do. The only person on the bench that could have a slight argument that he felt he should have played was Enzo Fernandez. But how good Malagusta was against Everton, as Crookie well knows, he had to start. So just not good enough, just not ready mentally to be able to be title challengers. But they showed in the second half the quality they do have, and fair play to coming back. The basics of football will never change, Sam. Win your individual battles. And if enough lose their battles, you'll be 1 or 2 down by half time.
Great day for Nick Voltemada, who was absolutely terrific. And I'm really pleased for him because he had a bad weekend the week before. And the fact that he scored 2 goals, 2 brilliant goals as well, I'm really pleased for him because I think he actually, poor lad's come over to the Premier League. He was left out of Stuttgart's Champions League squad last year, yet fired them to the cup success prior to that. He was given all sorts of stick by some of the German media because of the overinflated price that they perceived Newcastle were paying for him, mainly from some bitter old Bayern boys. But he's delivered, I think, reasonably well for Newcastle United after what has been a difficult start. He wasn't supposed to be the starting striker at the beginning of the season. That was supposed to be Johan Wissa, but because of injury, he was rushed in and given the chance to lead the line on a more regular basis than maybe even Eddie Howe wanted him to. But he's done a good job, and I think he's been a really good find for Newcastle. We've spent a lot of money in the summer, but still look as if they've got just a little bit of a light squad, especially defensively at the moment. Let's get into the bottom now, and it's a bit of a worrying time for West Ham United supporters, and even more so if you support Wolves. West Ham 6 points adrift heading into Christmas, minus 16 goal difference. They were spanked by Manchester City. 2 wins in 12 for Nuno Espirito Santo since coming in to West Ham. Why has it not worked, Crook?
Well, I think the squad he's inherited is poor. He's got the leftovers of Graham Potter and Julian Lopetegui before him. I think West Ham's recruitment has been poor now for a number of transfer windows, and he's not a miracle worker. I think he made some mistakes early in his tenure. He was naming some bizarre teams, wasn't he? Particularly away from home, I remember, against Leeds in a game that West Ham really needed something from. I think you commentated that one. But
yeah,
I don't know if he's doing much wrong now. I just don't think they're very good, West Ham. They were competitive against Aston Villa last weekend. They had a 15-minute spell, I think, in this game at Man City where City sort of came off the bride and it looked like they could take advantage, but they need a centre-forward because they can't rely on Callum Wilson, and Fulkrug is off to AC Milan. They need a central defender because Kilman looks absolutely shot to pieces. Still not convinced by the goalkeeper. I think that's something they're going to look at in this window as well. But I fear for them, West Ham, because you look at Leeds now, they've got a bit of momentum since that tactical change. I think Ellen Road for the rest of the season is going to be a really difficult place to do. Wolves are gone. I think Burnley will go with them. But it does look like a two-way fight out, doesn't it, between West Ham and Leeds, because I don't see that Nottingham Forest are going to stay down there. I think they've got too much quality. I think Fulham will win enough games, particularly at home. So if I was a West Ham supporter, as you've said, I'd be really worried at this moment in time. But sacking another manager is certainly not the answer.
Well, trying to find some decent players to come in would be a good one. Actually, the idea of overhauling the recruitment process is something that they probably need to do, because their recruitment has been so scattergun over the course of the last few years that they've been left with a sort of mismatch of a squad. It doesn't seem to make much sense. They've got no presence in midfield. Their defenders aren't good enough, which is a real problem. If you're going to be scrapping at the bottom of the table, at least what you've got to be able to do is defend for your life, and they just cannot do that. I remember Martin O'Neill saying, he looked at Jean-Claude Todibo, and he said, this guy's not got a single defensive bone in his body. And that was quite a withering assessment from Martin. But, you look over the course of the season, and too many errors, too many mistakes, too many mishaps, just not committed enough to make sure that the ball doesn't go into the net. And you're on a hiding to nothing if you're just going to concede as many goals as they are. Minus 16 goal difference at this stage of the season is a recipe for relegation, I'm afraid. You mentioned Leeds United, 8 points in 4 games now for Daniel Farke. They pulverised Palace, and deadly Dominic Calvert-Lewin cannot stop scoring, Scott.
What a signing. What a signing. And as you alluded to, how much Everton would love a fit and firing Calvert-Lewin as well. Look, I mean, well done to Daniel Farke. I heard Jamie Redknapp saying, and I totally agree with him, not about the results at Manchester City, but if he hadn't have changed the system and then been better from that second half of the City game, I don't think he'd be in charge right now. So there's nothing like West Ham and Leeds are very similar when you're playing at home. They can be so passionate, the fans, that they can feel like you've got an extra man. Alternatively, if things aren't going well, that shirt can weigh very heavy indeed. And now it's been turned. And now look at the results they've had recently. Now everyone's looking forward to the games, players and fans, and they seem to be in unison again. Absolutely, this is Leeds United on the way up. And if they carry on like this, they won't. I still think they'll have a dip. I still think they're, without doubt, bottom half, bottom 8 a team. But if they can, while you're in this run, pick up as many points as possible, then they won't be in too much trouble come the end of the season.
The big Boxing Day preview is on the way. So if you are listening to this podcast on Christmas Eve, you may well be lucky enough to be able to get the Boxing Day preview straight after it. We've got Monday Night Football before then. Fulham against Nottingham Forest, Arsenal, Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup. The quarter-final is on Tuesday night. And Boxing Day is going to be bumper because we've got loads of EFL football during the day. Manchester United, Newcastle at night. And then 27th and 28th, we've got loads and loads of football for you, obviously, as the Boxing Day fixtures are spread out. Crookmeister, Merry Christmas to you, you little Grinch. Love ya. Scotty, see you later on. Are you getting any special Speedos for Christmas? I can imagine you with a little Rudolph golden trunks being pulled out of your stocking.
I'll have to wait and see now, mate. You getting me excited.
Oh, right. Okay. That's a red nose, by the way, on the front, just in case you were wondering. We'll be back just ahead of the Boxing Day games to give you a big bumper preview to what should be a thrilling couple of days of action.